Okay, I call the Essex Town Select Board meeting for Monday, September 27th, 2021 to order.
I will call the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees meeting for Monday, September 27th to order.
Thank you, Andrew. Any agenda additions or changes?
A few items from staff. Item 6A, which is the consent agenda, consider approval of resolution for the Vermont Community Development Program. That material did not actually make it into the packet, so I'd like to add that. It is timely. Champlain Housing Trust needs to include this in their application. It's for the recovery housing at the fort that the Select Board approved support for, so that's at your tables in front of you. The village attorney sent in some items this afternoon. There are edits to the documents that are in the packet for shared services. The MOU for shared services, the police contract, and the reappraisal agreement all have edits from the village attorney. There are also 3 documents that are new from the village attorney, a stormwater agreement, an IT agreement, and a finance agreement. So I will leave it to the boards if they want to add those things. They just came in this afternoon.
Okay.
And they're at your tables, and I've emailed them to all the board members. So hopefully everybody at least has them. If not, haven't had a chance to look at them yet.
I have not had a chance to look at them yet.
I have not either. And I don't see the MOU one here on my part of the table, but so I guess this one. Yeah.
Anybody else missing the MOU?
Read mine, Andy.
Okay.
I have mine.
All right, thanks. I'm struggling with, I guess, the stuff that was sent to us 2 hours ago, including it since we've not had a chance to even look at it. I don't know. Go ahead, Tracy.
I will move to amend the agenda. I said that correctly this evening. To include an item 6C for the resolution for the VCDP grant application authority.
It'd be 6A. It's just the
6A. Apologies.
Second.
So, Tracy, did you also want to make some changes to some minutes?
Yes, sorry. From the, I apologize, I need to pull up my email. There was a comment in the, was it the August 13th minutes regarding the presentation around the retainer contracts. There was a question about
Okay, so you want to pull that out? We can discuss it. At the time. So it's just September 13th.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. So, Don, you had seconded it. You okay with including that as well on the agenda changes? Okay. We have a motion and a second from the select board. I guess from a discussion standpoint, I'm not sure how you're feeling about the trustees are feeling about us not wanting to review these documents we have not seen yet.
I realize you have a motion on the table that has already been seconded. I'd be happy to speak if you'd like me to.
Yes, please, Andrew.
I think I can completely understand with the agreements with regards to stormwater, IT, finance, since we haven't even discussed those yet. With the MOU, the police, and reappraisal, I would think that those would be pretty big components of tonight's meeting. So while we may not have had a chance to review them, without using those copies tonight, I'm unsure if we'd be spending our time wisely.
What are select board thoughts about that?
I have thoughts about that. I have not read through them. I have not had any time to digest them, collect my thoughts on them. They were not in the packet. They were not available for the public in advance of the meeting. They were not sent to us even to meet the statutory timeline for an emergency agenda item. And I don't feel as though they should be part of our discussion this evening. If you want to bring those up as discussion points tonight, as part of your response to what was in our packet, I have no problem with that, but I do not think that they should be a formal agenda item.
Don or Pat, any comments?
I'm just trying to scan through them right now to see if it's significant changes or not. Greg, apologies. Do you know if the most recent changes are they the one in red or blue?
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, sorry, the changes, most recent changes are the ones in red.
Red.
And that's just tough, short timeline. The town attorney turned around, his changes in about 3.5 days. The village attorney then turned theirs around in about 3.5 days over the weekend. It's just a matter of tight timing.
So these three, though, the MOU, the reappraisal, and the police service are the same we got in our packet. Is that correct? or not?
No, the ones in front of you now just came in this afternoon, and the text that's in red are the edits suggested or provided by the village attorney.
Oh, okay.
And this mechanism wise, so this, I know we had Bill look at it. So then did Bill's edits then go to the village attorney for
Yes.
review?
Yes,
So,
they
I
got
mean,
out on Friday afternoon to the village attorney.
Yeah, I mean, we did ourselves ask for some of this information to be included last week. I guess I understand absolutely what you're saying, but I think it's part of the mechanism for us even addressing this. We knew it seems that if 3.5 days were required by both parties, then we should have just last week said maybe this meeting isn't going to work. But
Right,
since we are all here and I'm just scanning through, I don't have a problem with the 3 that we discussed last week going through and addressing. I do agree with Tracy on that. The new ones, I mean, none of us, it sounds like, have had any chance to review this at all. So, I mean, I'm okay looking at the 3, but I would also have problems with stuff I haven't even seen yet.
We're gonna have to. We would. Don, what are your thoughts on the ones that?
Like Patrick said, I'm okay with the 3 because we've discussed it so much and asked for the corrections. But not the new ones.
Yeah, given that it's not available to the public, we're gonna have to go through line by line on every new change here.
They wanted us to be public about it.
Yeah, I know that, but we also need to be cognizant of how long meetings take. Um,
I'm on the same page. I think that there's 3 that
Yeah.
we were expecting responses to. I have no problem with that, but the other ones that nobody's had eyes on yet, we can discuss that at our next meeting.
Right, so would the potential path forward then be to review those 3 documents with clear reading of all of the changes that are new, that were not included in the packet? That would potentially, okay, do we, then is it, since it's not in the packet, what is the effect of is if we agree to include those? Is there a difference between agreeing to include the documents or not?
I don't think there's a substantive difference between having them in writing and having a discussion about what the response is this evening. I don't see any difference in that because those are already part of the packet. It's just a response to what
Yep.
was in the packet.
Right.
So then we set aside stormwater information technology and shared financial agreements for a future meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then do we accept including these 3 recently updated documents part of the agenda?
As far as I'm concerned, it's already on the agenda.
It is on the agenda.
Discussion of a response
Gotcha.
to
Okay.
our proposal is already on the agenda.
I agree.
Okay, well, in that case, so is the resolution for the Vermont, the 6A that we did add. We're adding the material that goes behind it. So I think it's a similar case where we would need to agree to include these 3 documents as part of the meeting material. I don't think we then go back and update the packets, do we?
We add them in with agendas, additions, and changes. There's a cover sheet that goes on, and
Right.
then we include the new items.
Right. Okay. All right. So I think in the to consider it in the same way that we added the material for agenda item 6A, we need to also include these 3 documents for agenda item 5B.
Okay, so can I amend my motion to include the updated memorandum of understanding, the updated police services agreement, and the updated reappraisal and assessor services agreement?
Okay, so we have included those in the motion. Don, you did agree for seconding. Kathy, do we need to restate the motion at all? Are you following it? Kathy there? Recording secretary?
I don't see. I think we're all set. You have the motion to include the materials for item 6A, the materials for the MOU, the police services reappraisal and assessor updates with 5B, and to move the September 13th minutes to business is what I have in my notes for the motion.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Greg. Okay, any further discussion from the select board? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Thank you all. Thank you for that, select board. Trustees, could I get a similar motion with the exception of we do not need to add the item for 6A as that was a select board only item?
Yeah, the minutes, the September 13 minutes are also select board only.
So if one of the trustees wanted to make a motion,
I'll give it a shot. I move we add, well, what,
the 3 updated MOUs
yeah, under 6B, do I have to specify?
under 5B.
Sorry. I move we add the memorandum of understanding, the police contract proposal, and the appraiser's office proposal that arrived today to the agenda under 5B.
I'll second.
And Roger, did you also say the MOU?
I believe I did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I second.
Trustees, any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Pass unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We've got the agenda amended and approved for both boards. The next business item is, or the next item on the agenda is public to be heard. This is a time for members of the public to speak to both boards about issues that are not on the agenda. I'd like to remind folks that this is a joint meeting, so please, if you have an issue to bring up, make sure it's relevant to both boards. That would be preferable. Also, please be brief, be civil. Please refrain from using inappropriate language. Address remarks to myself as select board chair or to Andrew as the village president. Please do not attack other members of the public or town staff. Also, please do not interrupt. If you are on the remote meeting, please mute yourself unless you've been called upon to speak. And also, it's helpful if you turn off your camera. It's less distracting for folks if you're not speaking. Did I miss anything? Okay, let's see. I am going to start online this time. I see Lorraine Zaloom, your hand's up. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Hi, Andy. I hope this is for both boards. I'm like, oh, wait, that was a monkey wrench. I was wondering, there was a recent project at a planning commission that we went to, and I think it's a really good project because there's solar involved as well, and they're increasing some high density residential apartment building. But one of the things I didn't realize or recognize because of the way the plan was presented was that there would be a number of trees cut down. So I was wondering in our town plan, and I'm not sure if the village, in terms of their planning and how they work, if there was ever any consideration given to replacement of trees that get cut down, because that, in terms of offsetting carbon sequestration, erosion, and filtering of our stormwater runoff as well to help slow up stormwater runoff. I only saw like screening included, so I didn't know if that's in our town plan or not in terms of dealing with climate change.
Mr. Chair, we'd have to look into it.
Yeah, we have to look into that. None of us here have that question at our fingertips, so we'll have to get back to you, Lorraine.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for the question. Okay, I don't see any other hands up at this point online. There is one person who's on the phone. If you're on the phone and would like to speak, go ahead now. Okay, sounds like not. Okay, then in the room, Patty Davis, come up to the microphone, please. State your name. Although I've already said it.
Okay. It's a great day. I'm Patty Davis, 9 Hillside Circle, and I wrote it down, so I'll just read, if that's okay, Andy. And to keep it short, I'm just going to submit this to you, Andy. Bedtime reading, or whenever you have a meeting with Ron Hogue, our police chief. I asked him to possibly attend tonight, but if he's not here, then I'm not going to read anything from it. It's just not that you need extra material to read, but I like research. So it was a rainy day, and I spent 4 hours researching because I only gardened for a few hours this morning. The Capital Program Review Committee, because I've been looking into committees to see what I wanted to be on, whether we're separate, together, whatever, doesn't matter. And I guess this Capital Review Committee is part of the Junction. So I'm just going to read some kind of interesting tidbits, and you can absorb it or throw it out. Here we go. A lot of revised re-ranking of outstanding capital projects were observed on it was a very, very long list. I won't get into it. Many have original estimates when estimators came to review a project in the Junction that go back to 2001 to 2005. One that caught my eye, 2009, an estimate was done for a bike lane sidewalk from West Street to Susie Wilson Road. And there were so many, and this was just the year 2016. So February 2018 minutes, number 6. Waterline Jones explained the whoops, are you okay? Waterline Bridge Jones explained the 12-inch water line that feeds Essex West water tank off Athens Drive simply blew out, with millions of gallons of water flowing everywhere. He discussed hotspots, which equals a density of a problem area with or without tight soils. I'm into soils, as you know, I'm a gardener. Then this whole thing was discussed what was discussed was what is the best practice on how to notify the public of these breaks. And I don't answer, but my question was, did you inform the public at that time? Okay, November 6, 2018 minutes, number 4. I'm going to give these to you. You can check my facts. Mr. Brown recapped the spreadsheet of the 5-year plan and said, if the capital funds transfer stays at 7.5%, the capital project's budget will be